But that's coming from me, who's sitting here at 9:30 in the evening, hoping to eat a stick of pepperoni after this, and have not written a single book in my life. Guys, I want you to know that I try to strive to be cute, and then my motivation kind of just goes out the window, so you get what you get. I am here reviewing my May Owl Crate Box book in July, so look at me go. It is Incendiary by Zoraida Cordova. I annotated for the first time. I feel professional. I'm just gonna start by saying that fantasy is not my genre, and this is a fantasy book, so take this with a grain of salt because it wasn't a bad book. Fantasy and I just aren't on the same page so much of the time. So yeah, just take this review lightly. You can make your own decision about it because if you really like fantasy, I'm sure you're really gonna love this book. So Incendiary is essentially, I'm going to give you the best synopsis that I can because listen, there was kind of a lot that happened and I kind of blacked out for a good chunk of it. So I'm gonna do my best. So this basically is about a girl named Renata who is what is called a Moria. I believe that's how you say it. A Moria is just a magic wielder, and there are, I believe, 4 different types of Marias in the world. And essentially the king is trying to like wipe them all out because he doesn't want them to like turn against him. So Renata was taken as a child to live in the palace and work as like a weapon for the king, and she ended up getting rescued from the palace by this group called the Whispers, and I think she was like 9 years old, and she ended up going to live with this rebel group. And for the past like 8 years, she was just consistently training to be a rebel and falling in love, and then Des ends up getting kidnapped by the palace, so Renata ends up going back to the palace to like save him, and that's the plot. That's what you're getting. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I struggled between going from 2.5 to 3 because I just really didn't love this book, and if I was just being a complete jerk, I probably would have given this just a 2 on Goodreads, but I don't want to give Cordova a really bad rating because this wasn't a bad book. I just don't love fantasy as much as I love other genres. So I decided to go with a very average 3. The average rating on Goodreads is a 4.01. That is out of 1,612 ratings and 528 reviews at the time of me filming this video. So I'm going to talk about representation. There really wasn't any. In terms of content warnings, there is a lot of violence. This is kind of like a war story at times, so it does get a little violent, a little bit gory, and there is also bullying within the Whisper group. So let's talk about the plot. The plot was interesting enough. Like, there were a few little goals that were happening here and there, and it made it flow pretty well. I was able to keep up with what the characters were doing for the most part, and all of the plot twists that happened were very predictable, at least for me as the reader. I kind of predicted everything. Like, I think 50% of the way in, I knew what the big like twist at the end was gonna be, which made it kind of a bummer to read because obviously like it wasn't really a big deal anymore because I already knew what it was. Too many plot twists in a story leave me feeling a little bit cheated out of a story because it almost feels like the author is relying too heavily on the element of surprise as opposed to actually honing in on their plot and making it really, really interesting and then adding a few twists here and there to keep the readers engaged and excited to read it. And it got to the point where I was just like, oh my god, like why is this so messy? Like why is everything just so backwards from what we were told and all this jazzy jazz? Like it didn't need to be that. In terms of pacing, I think the pacing was very uneven. For the first half of the story, reading it, I was so bored. I was like, if I hadn't been reviewing it, I probably would have DNF'd it. Actually, no, the boxes are so expensive. I wouldn't have DNF'd it, but I thought about it because the first half was just, I wasn't here for it. I was very bored. And then the second half, I felt like I couldn't catch my breath because like I said, things just kept happening and twists kept happening and I was just like, what is going on? So yeah, it was a little uneven. Didn't love that aspect of it. Now let's talk about characters. So I didn't like anybody in this story. Awkward. Yeah, all of the characters just sucked. Like, they just weren't good. Renata, the main character, was boring. She was whiny. She had no priorities other than Dez's dick, and I was just honestly over it because her sole motivation was for Dez. And I understand, like, she wanted to get him back after being kidnapped, but, like, calm down because your plan is putting a lot of people in danger, including yourself. Like, I hate when people are like, I have to go, I have to do it, I have to get my man. And it's just like, or you could take a couple of minutes and think about a cohesive plan that everybody can be in on, that everybody can help you. But no, that's cool. Whenever anything happened to any of the characters, I was just like, that sucks. I didn't feel a single thing toward them. Like, when Des got kidnapped, I was like, good for him. Like, he's having an adventure. I literally didn't care at all. And I feel like I was supposed to, but I just didn't give a shit. Like, all of the characters, there were so many different, like, injuries and things that happened to every character, and I would just be like, oh, that sucks. Maybe that means I'm a bitch, but honestly, I just think it was a lack of fleshed out characters. Also, Renata had my least favorite thing for main character women, which I didn't realize was my least favorite thing until when I read it, and that is the clumsy girl trope. So she was trying to like curtsy in front of people at the palace, and she fell flat on her face, and she was like, oh, I'm sorry, like, I'm clumsy. I need a female character who can walk without falling flat on their mediocre face, and then we'll call it a day. Honestly, side characters from the palace were more interesting than like the main characters in the story. Like, we had a couple, Lady Nuria and Leo. I'm not going to tell you like who they are or what they are to the story, but they're a lot more interesting than the actual characters that you're supposed to be interested in. But I was like, no girl, give me some more Nuria, give me some more Leo. Like, I needed better people. And they were better, but they weren't there that often. I was disappointed. In terms of authenticity, is it the same as the back of the book? Did the synopsis do it justice? Yeah, it was pretty much the exact same as the back of the book for 50% of the story, meaning that we got no other information than what the synopsis gave us. So that's the tea. Let's talk about the world. Let's talk about her world building, because obviously this is a fantasy and this is a very intricate magical system. So let's talk about how it fleshed out. I found it to be very info dumpy, which happens with a lot of fantasies. A lot of fantasies in the first like 200 pages, they just info dump the shit on you. So like, okay,
this is everything you need to know for this whole series.
And you're just like,
wow, this is a lot, but okay.
That was definitely this. Obviously, it's a fantasy and that shit happens, so don't be like too discouraged because that's just how it goes. But I honestly, like, I had to read the prologue twice to figure out what was going on. And that's the prologue. Like, that's not even when you're supposed to get all this info dumpy shit on you. But I literally was reading it and I was like, what is going on? I need to read this again. And it was just messy, so I didn't love that aspect. But once I did wrap my head around the magical system and the different types of Morias and all that stuff, don't ask me what they are because your girl does not remember. They were actually very interesting, and I thought the way that she did this was well done. I will say though that the time period confused me because it's supposed to take place 317 AC, and they talked like they were in modern times. So like the setting definitely was reminiscent of the time period, but they talked like they were in the 21st century. And there was kind of this disconnect of the story versus like how they're talking versus where they're supposed to be and all that stuff. So that kind of felt a little disconnected to me. And also the prologue took place like 3 minutes before the story started. So I was like, you can't really call this a prologue. like a prologue is supposed to take place a little in advance to give you some information, but it just took you, it was literally like, not 3 minutes. I don't want to say 3 minutes, but it was like at least 10 minutes before. Like, what are you doing? In terms of writing style, she does write with a sophistication that I really did like. You can tell that this isn't her first story. This is her 13th published story. So obviously she has a bit of a sophistication to her, and I really did like her writing. I do think at times there were paragraphs that didn't need to be there because they weren't really adding anything to the story. And there was a lot of inner monologue within Renata where I was just kind of like, bitch, get over yourself. So that was kind of iffy for me, but that's okay. Like, it's fine. I really did like her writing style. I think it was the perfect type of writing style for a fantasy, if that makes sense. Like, it worked really well for the story. Did it end up going where I wanted it? Yeah, because it ended. I didn't really have any goals for the end of the story. Like, I didn't have any sort of like, oh, I hope this happens. I hope this is the ending. I didn't care enough about the story to want an ending. So I do think the ending was satisfying. Do I? Yeah, I do think the ending was satisfying, even though I did guess the ultimate plot twist. Like, it was a satisfying ending, and I did set up a sequel in a really good way without like just adding something for the necessity of a sequel. So this was definitely interesting and it was definitely well done, but like I didn't care how the ending happened, so I didn't really have an answer for this one. Then I'm just gonna give you my last final general thoughts. The story gave me Throne of Glass vibes, so I feel like if you liked the Throne of Glass, you would like this book because the whole kingdom setup was very, very similar, like having the evil king. Not necessarily the rebel groups, but like kind of. Just like everything reminded me of the Throne of Glass. I don't know if she got a little bit of inspiration from it or not, but I feel like if you're a really big fan of Sarah J Maas and the Throne of Glass series, because I'm not going to say it like reminded me of the first book so much as the series as a whole. So I would definitely recommend this if you liked those. Last thing I want to say is that it did feel like the second book in the story as opposed to the first book. I felt like I was picking up in a story that had already started, and unfortunately that just didn't work for me. Like this book felt like it suffered from middle book syndrome, but it was only the first book in the series. And that's what makes me apprehensive to pick up the second book when it comes out in 2021, because I don't have a reason to if I believe that the first book felt like it was suffering from middle book syndrome. So I will just say that much. It was a good fantasy story, and if I was super into fantasy like I used to be, I probably would have loved this story. I think it was too long, and I don't necessarily love everything that happened. I do recommend this book to people who like fantasy and people who are looking for a quick and easy fantasy. Not quick. This took me 4 days to read, and I've been averaging like a book every 2 days. So if you're into an easy fantasy, then I think this would work for you because it wasn't overly complex. And once you get your mind around the magic system, it's really easy to understand. So I definitely will say that. But yeah, that is all I have to say today. Thank you for tuning into this video. I don't know. I just didn't love it. So let me know in the comments below if, oh my God. Let me know in the comments below if you've read Incendiary, if you plan on it, and if you have, what are your thoughts? Do you agree or disagree with me? Obviously, a lot of people disagree, so like I said, just take this review very lightly. This is just my own personal opinion, but as always, please like, comment, and subscribe for more content. I've decided to only post twice a week now instead of 3 times a week because I really want to go and explore my province now that it is like opened up. And I can't do that if I'm just constantly on booktube and constantly making content. So I'm gonna do twice a week now, so you'll get 2 times a week content. And until next time, bye readers!